Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha. Dear friends, we had seen in our previous class how Madhusudana Saraswati explained the Shruti propounding the false nature of this universe. So Mithyatva, he wanted to show us how the scriptural sentences directly state that the universal appearance or world appearance is false. And now there is inference also. That means the falsity of the universe is not only dependent on the scriptural sentences, it can be established firmly with the help of reasoning also. So we had seen that Drishyatva is one of the reason given by the author here. Drishyatva means whatever is appearing, all appearances are false. Therefore, whatever appears, that is false. Drishyatvena. And the example given is Shukti Rajatadi. That means the appearance of silver on a piece of conch shell is false. Similarly, the appearance of this world on this consciousness is only a false appearance. Drishyatvena. Of course, there are other reasons also. Jadatva, Parichinnatva. These are also strong reasons in support of the theory that the world appearance is only a false one. Jadatva, because the world is jada, inert, therefore its knowledge, its appearance is only false. Similarly, it is limited. Whatever is limited cannot be eternal. This also proves that the world is only false. Thus, establishing the false nature of this world experience, now Madhusudana Saraswati continues. The Atma Adhyastatadeva Anatmani Siddhe Tatra Atmadhyasaha Anatma Adhyasena cha Atmano Dosha Sadrushyadi Sambhavat. Now, how the superimposition is possible here? How the self consciousness is superimposed on the non-self? There is only one reason, that is Atma Adhyastataiva Anatmani Siddhehe. So the entire manifest world, the inert non-self world, is non-self because it is superimposed on the self. That means there are two categories, one having ultimate reality and other only mundane temporary reality. So the world appears and its existence is entirely dependent on this self, and therefore it is non-real. Tatra Atma Adhyasaha. So on this the inert body, senses, intellect, etc., the self or consciousness is only superimposed. Anatma Adhyasena cha Atmanaha, and just because the self is taken as non-self, because there are various kinds of misunderstanding regarding the nature of Atman, Dosha Sadrushyadi Sambhavat. There can be many impurities and similarity also, because for superimposition there should be some base like similarity, etc. That's what they argued. And now we can find the similarity, that having some impurities is the similarity, and that's why the self is superimposed on the non-self also. Tatra Anatma Adhyasaha iti Atmashriyadi Dosa Prasangacha. Tatra Anatma Adhyasaha iti Atmashriyadi Dosha Prasangacha. What is this? This is, once the self, the nature of the self is superimposed on another thing, then it can be taken as non-self, and thus we can say that there can be the fault defect called Atmashraya. Atmashraya means self-dependence. It is in this way that for this self, we say that self is superimposed on the non-self, and therefore the non-self is superimposed on this. This is Atma Ashraya Dosha. Etena Atma Anatma Adhyasasya Avidyatmakatvat. Atma Anatma Adhyasasya. That means the superimposition of both the non-self on the self on the non-self. Both. Avidyatmakatvat. So this is due to our spiritual ignorance or the innate ignorance called avidya, and therefore na vikalpavasaraha iti apastham. So if anybody says that there cannot be any options regarding that what is superimposed on what, in that case there will be two options, etc. So whatever has been argued, now the author says here that that kind of argument is simply denied here. How? Swaprakasha Atmani Avidyayaha api Anupapattehe. The problem here is, what is the base of this avidya? In the Sri Bhashyam, a commentary by Bhagwan Ramanujacharya on Brahma Sutra, we find some Saptavidha Anupapatti, 7 Anupapatti, that means impossibilities in the Advaita, especially in the case of this avidya, Swarupa Anupapatti, Anyadhana, this Tirodhana Anupapatti, Ashraya Anupapatti, etc. So here, now he says, how can the avidya be present in this self? Because Swaprakasha Atmani, avidya cannot be present in the self. The self cannot be the substratum of ignorance, spiritual ignorance, because the self is regarded as Swaprakasha, that means self-effulgent, that which is of the form of jnana always. So how can there be avidya? Tadhahi. In this also there can be two options. How? One, tadhahi sapi adhyasta anadhyastava. Now in this we have to discuss this particular matter. This avidya, if the self is taken as its substratum, is this avidya superimposed on the self, adhyasta, or anadhyasta? So without superimposition, it is in the self. So two options are there. Is it superimposed or not? Tatra adye katham natmashrayadi dosha prasangaha. So if you consider the first option, that the avidya resides in the self, that means the self is the substratum of avidya, then there is a defect. Atmashrayadi dosha prasangaha katham na. So how can there be the absence of this defect called Atmashraya? That means the defect called Atmashraya will certainly be there. Atmashraya means the avidya is present in the self by adhyasa, and that adhyasa is caused by avidya. So there will be Atmashraya, that means self-dependence. It means to reside in the self, the avidya depends on adhyasa, which depends on avidya. So this is a kind of chakra. And if we say that this avidya is not superimposed on the self, then tasya anuchedat, then avidya cannot be removed, and it will be eternal. And then anirmoksha prasangaha, then the self cannot be liberated. That means there cannot be any liberation to the self. So there are the two defects regarding avidya. Sarvasya adhyasa moolatve. And if we say sarvasya, that means the entire dual appearance of the world, if the entire thing is adhyasa moolatve, taken as based on adhyasa or superimposition, that means if anybody says that the entire world appearance is caused by superimposition, then Brahma Pramadi Vyavastha Nasyat, then there cannot be the system in the world like this is Brahma and this is Prama ityadi. And generally we find in the world that when somebody knows the rope as rope, the snake as snake, it is prama, that means valid knowledge. It is not discarded later on. And when the piece of rope is taken as snake, it is called Brahma or illusion. But if the entire world appearance is taken as caused by the avidya or the adhyasa superimposition, then there cannot be this kind of difference. This is Brahma, this is Brahma, because everything will be only Brahma. There cannot be any Brahma at all. That is the problem. Ekasyaiva atmanaha pramana, prameya, pramiti, pramatru, rupatacha, viruddha. So the opponent argues that because of these reasons, avidya cannot be taken as the cause of all world experience. And second thing, avidya cannot reside in the atma also, because atma is swaprakasha, self-effulgent. And if we take that the avidya permanently resides, then there cannot be liberation to that self. And now another point here is, if the entire world is considered as caused by avidya, then there cannot be this distinction between real knowledge and the false knowledge. Not only that, if single atma is considered ekatmata paksha, if single atman is considered as pramata, pramiti, pramana, prama, everything, then there will be contradiction. That means one self consciousness is taken as the knower and the known, knowledge and the process of knowing, all this. So how can a single thing be the possessor of all these various qualities? That is the problem here. Ekasyaiva atmanaha pramana, prameya, pramiti, pramatru, rupata. That means one single thing being different at a particular time is really contradicted. Avirodha abhyupagamecha. And if we say that single thing can be different, the single atma can be pramata, pramiti, pramana, prameya, that means the knower, the known and the knowledge, process of knowledge, everything, only single atma is taken, then saugata matapattihi, then it will rather incline towards the Buddhism, because in Buddhism also there is no other separate entity regarded. Therefore, if in Advaita also we understand the self as different though being single, then it will naturally favor the Buddhist view. And now, having put forth the entire argument of the opponent, now Madhusudana Saraswati replies, Atra uchyate. Now, what is the standpoint of Advaitins? He says, in this regard, we would like to reply this. Aham manushyaha karta bhokta ityadi pratitihi tavat sarvajana siddha. Now, it's a matter of common experience to everybody that I am a human being, I am the doer, I am bhokta, the enjoyer of fruits. I do everything and I receive the fruit of that. So this kind of experience is seen in everybody. Sacha na smritihi. We cannot say that this kind of experience to everybody is only a kind of smriti. Smriti means a kind of remembrance. He says na. So this kind of smriti, this kind of pratiti is not smriti. Aparoksha avabhasatvat bheda agraha purvakatvacha. And here we find the difference between smriti and pratiti. That means experience and memory, remembrance. There is difference. It is not smriti because aparoksha avabhasatvat, because what shines there or what is the particular matter of that particular experience, pratiti, is aparoksha, not paroksha. And in remembrance we find that when we remember something, that particular object of remembrance is not present before our eyes. If it is present, we cannot say it is remembrance. That is the difference between experience and memory. That means when we get experience, the object is present before our eyes, and when we remember something, In the absence of that object, the knowledge of that object is called memory. So this way, both the knowledges can be differentiated. Bheda agraha purvakatvacha. And in this particular pratiti we find Bheda agraha purvaka. This kind of experience is produced without reference to difference. And in Smriti there is difference, and here there is no difference, only identity. And what then? Can it be taken as real knowledge? He says napi prama. So this kind of experience, aham manushyaha, aham karta, aham bhokta, this is not memory, not even right knowledge. It is not valid knowledge. Why? He says shruti yukti badhitatvat. There is the defect called badhita. That means it is contradicted. If somebody says that I am a human being, I am the doer, I am the enjoyer of my deeds. So if somebody feels that, that kind of feeling is not real knowledge. It is not prama. Why? Because this knowledge is contradicted by Shruti and Smriti. Shruti, the scriptural sentences. Smriti, the other valid sentences based on Shruti sentences. And Yukti, especially the reason, valid reason. So here, what are the Shruti? Tathacha Shrutayaha. That means now the scriptural sentences are being quoted which favor that the experience to everybody that I am human being, I am doer, I am enjoyer, etc. is only a superimposition. It is not valid knowledge. What do the scriptural sentences say? 1. Yoyam vijnana mayaha praneshu hrudi antar jyotihi purushaha. Now the self, the nature of self is clearly mentioned here. Yoyam vijnana mayaha. That means the self, the consciousness energy present in this is vijnana mayaha, of the form of only knowledge. Praneshu hrudi antar jyotihi. It is within these vital breaths, within this heart, and it is the radiance within, it is the light within, because of which everything shines forth. And it is Purushaha, and it is present in the multitude. Ayam Atma Brahma. Now the scriptural sentences say that this self present in all the beings is the Brahman, is the cosmic reality. How? Because the Brahman is stated as having no attributes at all. It is absolute, it is pure, it is without any characteristics. So that is the very nature of the Brahman, they say. And they equate that Ayamatma Brahma. That means they equate the self with the Brahman. They say that whatever is perceived as the limited Atman or consciousness or individual consciousness is ultimately not different from the cosmic reality. It is one. But because of this avidya, because of this ignorance, it appears to be limited. It appears to be less knowing, all that. So these are all attributed qualities, and if these adjuncts, if these layers, conditions are removed, then the individual soul appears, the individual soul shines forth like the Brahman only. So it is the Brahman, there is no doubt in that. They say Ayamatma Brahma, this says, and there also Aham Brahmasmi and Atmacha Brahma. So several times in the Bhashya also Shankara Bhagavad-pada explains to us that the self, individual self, is no other than the Brahman. But how it is perceived differently, the only thing is because it is so tuned by this avidya, the individual self is extrovert, and since everything appears as limited, inert, it takes itself also as limited, inert. And when the person sits in deep meditation, gets into himself and removes, discards all the conditions, and when he finds himself, the pure vibrating self, then he can realize that it is the Brahman, none other than that. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Even the Taittiriya Upanishad says the Brahman, the Atman, the consciousness is Satyam, reality, existence, Anantam, eternity, and Jnanam, it is the knowledge. So therefore there can be no difference at all. Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. So they try to make clear the true nature of this self, saying that it is Vijnanam, it is experience. Anandam, it is only this bliss. That is Brahma, it is all pervading. Sa Atma Apahata Papma. So the Upanishad also says that this self is Apahata Papma. That means it is devoid of any kind of impurity. So all impurities pertain to the body, pertain to the mind, pertain to the intellect, and whoever attaches himself with these will find himself impure. But when there is no identity at all between body and soul, mind and soul, intellect and soul, then there will be pure form of the self. One can understand the true nature of self as pure only. Therefore, Sa Atma Apahata Papma, that means in the mundane sense of this term, there can be all impurities. A person may find himself impure, but when the conditions are separated, then there will be Apahata Papma. Apahata Papma in the sense pure, devoid of any kind of impurity. Yat Sakshat Aparokshat Brahma. And another scriptural sentence says, Yat Sakshat Aparokshat, that which is direct and within, experienced within. Yat Sakshat Aparokshat Brahma. So the Brahman is direct, but it is experienced within. That is the sense of this particular sentence. Because it is direct, of course, but direct in the sense not matter of knowledge, external knowledge. It is aparoksha. Now we understand that whatever is presented to the senses is pratyaksha. Whatever is not grasped by the senses is paroksha. And whatever is not grasped by the external senses but experienced within is aparoksha. And that's why Shankaracharya has always insisted on this particular one, aparoksha anubhuti, aparoksha anubhavaha. That means it is not experienced externally, but it is felt within, it is realized within. And that kind of realization is direct only, because it is sakshat, it is direct. The person is proof there, because he gets the experience. But it is not gained with the help of the external senses, therefore it is aparoksha. Thus, sakshat aparokshat brahma ya atma sarvantaraha. Another sentence says, ya atma sarvantaraha. So that atman, that self, the consciousness, is sarva antaraha, is deep within all the beings. That means whatever moves, whatever vibrates, whatever animates, so there we find this self, and without this nothing can move. And because of this particular consciousness only, there is movement in all the beings. Yo ashanaya pipase shokam moham jaram mrityum atyeti. Yaha means the self. Ashanaya pipase. Ashanaya, that is hunger. Pipasa, that means thirst. So these two, hunger and thirst. Atyeti, so he goes beyond that. Not only that, shokam, moham, jaram, mrityum atyeti. That means the person who realizes the true nature of self will go beyond one, hunger, thirst, old age, grief, illusion, and ultimately death. So he will not have all these, because he is established in the self, and therefore he will transcend all the mundane feelings, all the limitations. And we understand that ashanaya, pipasa both belong to the body, shoka, moha both belong to the mind, and jara, jara physical, mrityu physical. So all these, a person goes beyond all these limitations. Atyeti sa yat tatra kinchit pashyati ananvagatastena bhavati asango hyayam purushaha ityadya. Now, saha yat tatra kinchit pashyati ananvagataha tena bhavati. So the person, whatever he finds as different, then he follows that. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. But when one finds oneself and not connected with any other external thing, then he is firmly established in himself. He becomes one with the self, and there is no deviation at all. Asango hyayam purushaha, and at this particular point of time, he will be asangaha. That means not having any kind of anointment. That means he will not be anointed, he will not be connected with any other thing. There are no cliche, no connection at all. That is asangaha. That means totally detached. And this is the kind of experience one gets in deep meditation, that there will not be any connection of outward matter. No connection. And this being detached, being unconnected and remaining as pure self is drashtu swarupe avasthanam, and that is mentioned here, asangohi ayam purushaha. So all these scriptural sentences, ityadya and many more, what do they say? Akartru bhoktru paramananda brahmarupatam atmanah darshayanti. So all these scriptural sentences demonstrate, show us that the Atma, the self, is one. Akarta, it is not the doer. Then what is the doer? It is only the mind, propelled by avidya, which instigates the senses, the body, and thus a person indulges in something. So doing something is not automatically done, is not the task of the pure consciousness, but doing something is because of the body or senses, and the body senses, they are inert and therefore they cannot function independently. They are to be driven by something inner, and that is mind, and mind is also matter. Therefore it cannot function itself, though there is something, there should be something to activate that, operate that, and that the factor within is intellect, and behind that intellect there is the pure consciousness, and pure consciousness only driven by this avidya, due to this adhyasa, operates all these, and hence there is the world experience. And thus kartrutva is a thing of all these: intellect, mind, senses, body, not of this consciousness, pure energy, because all the scriptures say that it is Swayam Jyotihi, it is only the pure radiant energy. So that energy cannot directly involve in all these transactions, but it can operate through body, senses, mind, intellect, etc. And once this particular connection is disconnected, it's separated, then the consciousness will remain as pure consciousness, and that particular state is samadhi, and through that one can attain liberation also. So this kartrutva is not of the consciousness one. Abhokta, so naturally that which cannot do something, that which does not do anything at all, cannot be the receiver of the fruit, because if I do something, I will get the fruit of that. When I don't do anything at all, when something is done because of the body, senses, mind, intellect, etc., so how can I get the result of that? Therefore the scriptural sentences say here clearly that the self is abhokta, it is neither the doer nor the enjoyer. And what is then the true nature of this self? Paramananda Brahma Rupata. So the true nature of this self is Paramananda Brahma. That means it is absolutely the cosmic reality, all pervading reality, which is of the form of bliss. So that is the true nature of the self, and all the other thing is only superimposed one. This is the Shruti. That means Madhusudana Saraswati has shown how the scriptural sentences show clearly that the self is a non-doer, non-enjoyer, etc. And on the other side, what about the yukti? What about logical reasoning? Now Madhusudana Saraswati demonstrates the reasoning. 1. Vikarinaha parichinnattvena anatmatva apattehe. Vikarinaha parichinnattvena anatmatva apattehe. The first defect is if we consider the self as karta, bhokta, pramata, etc., then the self will become vikari, something modified, because all these things are seen, are perceived in the limited things only, that which is produced. So if we say that the self is also the doer, enjoyer, etc., then the self will become something produced, vikari, some modification. And whatever is modified is parichinna, is only limited. So if we say that the self is the doer, enjoyer, etc., then it amounts to saying that it is modification. And if we accept that the self is a modification, then it will become parichinna, limited, and whatever is limited has been taken as non-self. So it will ultimately go in favor of the non-self nature of the self. That is the contradiction here, anatmatva apattehe. And we are talking about the self, and we finally land in proving that the self is a non-self. So that is the problem here. That's why we cannot accept this particular theory that the self is a modification, karta, bhokta, etc. 2. Svenaiva swasya grahane kartru karma virodhat. Now we find here svenaiva swasya grahane. If we think that the Atma is karta, so what about drashta? If it is karta, it will be drushya, and it cannot be drashta. And if it is drashta, it cannot be drushya. That is the problem here. We understand. That means whatever sees, it can always see. It cannot be seen. And whatever is karta, if a person understands that I am the doer, then he is seeing himself as the karta. At a single point of time, how can a person know both that he is understanding himself as the perceiver, doer, etc.? So two things are there, doer and perceiver. When he understands himself as doer, he cannot be perceiver. If he is perceiving that, he cannot be the doer, because doer is only drushya, something perceived, and drashta cannot be drushya, and drushya cannot be drashta. That is the difference between the self and non-self. And here svenaiva, that means by the self himself, swasya grahane, when there is understanding of his own self, kartru karma virodhat, there will be a contradiction in the form of karta and karma. So a single thing cannot be both the karta, agent, and karma, the object. So single thing cannot be both. There is virodha, of course. Drushya sambandha anupapattehe bhedena abhedena va dharma dharmi bhava anupapattescha. There are two anupapatti here. That means impossibility or logical problems here. One, drushya sambandha anupapattehe. If there is a particular reality, single reality, which is both the karta and drashta, then it will be druk and drushya. Druk is the drashta and karta is the drushya. But what about the relation between these two? A relation, sambandha, resides between two things, that can exist between two things. Dvishto hi sambandha, that is what the Nyaya Shastra says. So if we want to establish relation between two things, then there should be absolutely two different things. And here in the case of Atman, there is one Atma. If you say it is both karta and drashta, that means druk and drushya, there cannot be the sambandha, the relation. And for relation we require two things. 2. Bhedena abhedena va dharma dharmi bhava anupapattescha. And there is another logical problem, that dharma dharmi bhava, that means the relation called dharmi and dharma. Dharma means property, characteristic. Dharmi means one which possesses that, one which has those characteristics or those properties. So here dharma dharmi bhava anupapattescha. Either through difference or non-difference, we cannot establish the relation called dharma and dharme. That means what is the property and what is that which possesses such property. Two things should be there, and if single Atma is taken, that kind of relation cannot be established. Next, Jnana Nityatva Pakshe. And if we understand that the Jnana is eternal, that is the true nature of the self, then Tattad Vyakti Bheda Dvamsa Pragabhava Samavaya Jnanatva Jatyadi Abhyupagame Gauravat. And if we understand that knowledge is eternal, then here Vyakti Bheda, Tattad Vyakti Bheda, that means in the world we find crores of individuals and therefore crores of substrata of that particular knowledge. Not only that, creation or production of that particular knowledge, destruction of that knowledge, and knowledge residing in that particular soul there through the relation called inherence, samavaya, and jnanatva jatyadi abhyupagame. And there another problem is, if so many knowledges or cognitions are taken here, then because there are so many cognitions, nityatve sati aneka samavetatvam, we will have to postulate jnanatva jati. That means a class called jnanatva in all these, because when there are many objects called pots, then there will be potness, the class. Similarly, when there are so many human beings, there will be humanness, that particular class. So when a single object remains, there cannot be class, and more than one naturally gives scope for this particular kind of class, that is called jati, generality. And jnana nityatva pakshe, and according to the Nyaya Shastra also, if we say that the self is dravya and jnana buddhi is only a quality residing in that, then there will be so many individuals, and in each individual production of knowledge, destruction of knowledge, and because there are so many cognitions in all these individuals, there will be a class called knowledgeness, and the relation between the possessor and the possessed, that is inherence. So many problems are there, and if you postulate all these things, then it will naturally lead to gaurava, prolixity or cumberousness. So that kind of defect will be there. This is another problem. Ekatva abhyupagame. Instead, if we postulate that there is only single knowledge as Atman, not that Atma is the substratum and knowledge is the property of that. If we say that knowledge is the very nature of the self, it is one, then atilaghavat, there is simplicity. So we will have to accept that the self is one, and therefore the cognition or knowledge is also one. There is simplicity in that. Ghatajnanam patajnanam iti upadhi bheda puraskarenaiva jnana bheda pratitehe. Then somebody may say, if there is one knowledge in all the beings, then how can you prove the difference in cognitions? We understand that a person gets ghatajnana, that means cognition of a pot. Another person gets cognition of a different thing, cognition of a tree, cognition of a table. So this way the cognition differs from person to person. If you say there is only one cognition, one knowledge in the form of the self, then what about these different cognitions? How do you justify the difference in the cognition? He says, Upadhi bheda puraskarenaiva jnana bheda pratitehe. Now the Advaitin explains that jnana bheda, that means difference in cognition, that is justified on the basis of the upadhi bheda, on the difference of the condition or the adjunct. We say when the single sun is reflected in different waters, we find if a bucket is put outside, if there is water in that, the sun gets reflected in that. The reflection of sun in the bucket full of water, reflection of sun in a well, reflection of sun in a pond, in a lake, in an ocean, in a river. So we find reflections are many. But when these adjuncts in the form of the water in the bucket, water in the well, etc., they are removed, there remains only single sun. So here also, when these conditions are removed, like ghata, pata, etc., so if these conditions are removed, there remains only one jnana, and difference in jnana is due to the difference of these objects only, which are the conditions. Swatastu jnanam jnanam ityeka swarupa avagamat. But if we don't take into account the different objects, then there will remain only one single knowledge. Jnanam iti eka swarupa avagamat. We can understand that after all it is the knowledge. It is not differentiated at all. It is single knowledge. Tad utpatti vinasha pratityoscha. Now what about the production of knowledge and destruction? Because at this particular moment I don't have the knowledge, and when I look at the object, that knowledge is produced, and the Nyaya Shastra says that that particular knowledge is produced when the senses come into contact with that particular object. That means when I look at a particular object called book, then there will be chakshusha jnana. That means the knowledge through eyes. Similarly, all these senses respond to the external objects, and that particular reaction and the reflection of the objects within is understood as cognition. And here, utpatti vinasha. According to the Nyaya system, there is the birth of that particular knowledge and destruction also. How is it destroyed? They say that that particular knowledge will remain for 3 moments, and in the 4th moment another knowledge will naturally remove that, and there will be another knowledge. That's why this particular knowledge is born and removed. That means it has creation and destruction, it has production and destruction. So that kind of system is given in the Nyaya system. But tadutpatti vinasha pradityoscha avashya kalpya vishaya sambandha vishayatayapi upapattehe. The Advaita system explains this particular feature, that of course the cognition of an object like pot, book, etc. is born. It is destroyed, you may say, but we find a different reason behind. That is avashya kalpya vishaya sambandha vishayataya. It says actually knowledge is not born, knowledge is not destroyed. It is only the connection with that particular object is born and destroyed. That means when there is connection between the senses and object, there is the knowledge. When there is no connection, there is no such knowledge. And here we understand that that particular relation, that particular contact is born, not the knowledge. Knowledge is always there. When there is that particular contact, that particular knowledge just manifests. And when that particular contact is not there, there is no knowledge. Thus, in this way also, you can attribute this particular creation and destruction to the contact, not to the knowledge. And thus we can understand that there is only one knowledge, and which is the form of the self. Vishayatayapi upapattehe upadhi paramarsham antarena swatah eva ghatat ghatantarasya bheda pratitehe. And upadhi paramarsham antarena, that means without reference to this particular condition, upadhi paramarsha. That means if you don't refer to that particular condition, then ghatat ghatantarasya swatayeva bheda pratitehe, then a particular ghata, that means knowledge of an object called pot, should be known being different from that of another pot. That means if there are 2 cognitions, cognition 1 of a pot, cognition 2 of another pot, then here how can you differentiate these 2? There is only one object, ghata, ghata, but cognitions are different, and here you will have to accept inevitably the condition, the difference in the condition. Upadhi paramarsham antarena, so you cannot justify this particular feature, and therefore you will have to accept the oneness of the knowledge. Tat pratibandhi graha tat pratibandhi graha asambhavat. That means tat means jnana and pratibandhi means its object. Jnana pratibandhi means the particular object called pot or book, any object in the world. So that is the jnana pratibandhi. Jnana pratibandhi graha asambhavat. That means without referring to the condition, you cannot refer to that particular object. So here he says, if there is cognition 1 as pot, cognition 2 as pot, then how can you differentiate these two? You will have to naturally take recourse that particular condition. Otherwise, you cannot get to the difference between these two cognitions. And Akasha Kala Dishamapi Nanatva Apattescha. If you say that the knowledge is different because it is differently perceived, then you will have to accept the many nature of sky, time, direction also. How? Because just because of the appearance or reflection, if you think that the image is also different, then the Akasha also manifests, also shows itself, also has reflection in many ways, like Ghatakasha, Patakasha. That means that particular space enveloped by a particular object called pot, the space enveloped in another object. So this way, the sky, which is totally all-pervading, which is propertyless, that is also seen as being limited. And if you say that just because of the reflection it is many, then you will have to say on account of these many reflections that the sky is also different. One, it is many, you will have to say. But in the Nyaya Shastra also, Akasham, Ekam, Vibhu Nityam, they have accepted the oneness of the sky. But Advaita here shows the fallacy that if you say that the Atman is many, the knowledge is many, because it is manifested in various substrata, then we say that the sky is also manifested in various substrata, then the sky should be taken as many. Not only that, even Kala, Kalastu Ekaha, that's what everybody says. Atitadi vyavahara hetuhu kalaha sacha ekaha vibhuhu nityaha. So actually Nyaya Shastra also says that time is one. Yoga Shastra also says time is one. But because of that particular condition, there is the worldly convention that that particular event, if it has stopped, we say it is past. If that particular action is continuing, we say it is present. If that particular action is going to take place, we say it is future. So this way, though time is one, we understand that as past, present, future, etc., depending on that particular condition. Otherwise, time, the pure form of time cannot be understood. And in the modern science also we find 3 arrows of time, and they have shown whether the time has physical existence or only a psychological reality. And the Yoga Shastra of course says that it is only vikalpaha, it is only psychological or creation. And the Nyaya Shastra, Nyaya Vaiseshika Shastra also says that time is absolutely one. It is a dravya, it is a substance, but it is understood as many just because of the conditions. And here Advaita says, see, if you say that the knowledge is many just because its reflections are many, then you will have to accept time also as many. But you say that though it appears in many substrata, time is one. So why don't you accept the oneness of this knowledge? That is the argument here. Not only time, space also. That is the disha, direction. We say that direction has no sense in the space. But on this particular planet, when we look at something and we understand that is with reference to that particular direction of the sunrise. So we say that where the sun appears to be rising, it is the east, and exactly opposite is the west, and when we face the sun in the east, the right is south and the left is north. So this way we have made some convention, but when we get into the space, when we don't find any horizon and any particular point where the sun is rising, then we cannot say exactly what is east, what is west. And that's why east, west, south, north, all these are only mental conditions that are particular to this particular planet. And in space, when there is no particular point to be shown very clearly, there cannot be any direction at all. And that's why there is always some kind of confusion when we travel in the air, in the plane. So we find whether the plane is moving or not, in which direction it is moving, we get sometimes confused. And just seeing that particular disk of the sun, we know that it is moving towards west or east, etc. So this kind of confusion is very common. Now the Advaitin asked the Dvaiti, asked the Nyaya Shastran here, if you say that the knowledge is many, then you will have to accept the manyness of time, space and direction also. Because these, though being one, appear in many substrata. If you say that the appearance is only due to condition and the base is one only, the same will apply to the knowledge also. It is one, but it appears in many substrata. Kartrutvadehe vastavatve anirmoksha prasangat. And now another problem here the Advaitin wants to point out is Kartrutvadehe nityatve vastavatve. That means if you say that the self is karta, bhokta, pramata, etc., in true sense, then anirmoksha prasangaha, then the self can never get liberation. Because something real cannot be separated from that. If burning is the true nature of fire, you can never find fire without that burning. If touch is the very nature of air, you cannot find air without touch. So this is the problem. That means the true essence, the essential characteristic of a particular thing cannot be separated from that. Then if kartrutva, bhoktrutva, pramatrutva, that means knowing something, doing something, enjoying the fruits of something. So if all these are taken as the essential nature of the self, then the self can never get liberation. Because whatever is true nature of that cannot be separated, and as long as there are these limitations to the self cannot be out of that. And what do the scriptures say? That the self is nirupadhika, is without any conditions, and it is beyond all these, and kartrutva, bhoktrutva is etc. are only apparent, they are only attributed ones. And when the scripture is saying like that, how can we say that the kartrutva etc. are real nature of the self? And if we take them as real, as the Nyaya Shastra, Sankhya etc. take, then there cannot be liberation to the self. That is the problem. Swaprakasha anabhyupagamecha. And on the other side, if we don't accept the self as swaprakasha, because not all the systems of philosophy accept the self as swaprakasha. Here the Advaitins accept the self as swaprakasha. That means the self does not depend on any other thing for its experience, for its reference. So it is self-referent. That means the one looking at the self means he is looking at himself. And knowing the self is also self-referent only, swaprakasha. So there cannot be any other, because the moment you will say that it is also perceived by another thing, then automatically the second thing will be the self and the thing perceived will be non-self. And if we say that particular second knowledge is also perceived by third knowledge, then the third knowledge will be the self and second knowledge will be non-self. That is the problem here, because drushyatvat mithyatvam. If something is perceived, it becomes mithya, and if self is perceived, it will become mithya. But aparoksha anubhuti cannot be negated here. That means though we cannot externally see the self, externally understand the self, we can get the knowledge within. And this particular experience within is called aparoksha anubhuti, and that is possible, not the other kind of experience. And swaprakasha anabhyupagamecha, and we Advaitins say that this self is swaprakasha. If you don't accept that, then jagad andhya prasangaha, that means the entire world would plunge in darkness. What is that darkness? That is only ignorance, because there is no entity, no factor called knowledge. Then everything will be only non-self, everything will be only that kind of thing illuminated by other, known by other. And if everything is known by other, then the entire world will be dark, will be ignorant. So that is the problem here. Parama premaspadattvena cha, when we refer to the self, it is actually parama premaspada. That means to everybody, whatever is more desirable, more dear, the dearest thing to everybody is the self. Parama premaspada. Tasya ananda rupatvat. And therefore, the self is ananda rupa. Because nobody desires something which is something disgracing or something hate-worthy. Nobody desires that. If a person loves something, it is only for one reason, that it gives him pleasure, it gives him bliss. Parama premaspadattvena cha paramananda rupatva. So here we find two things mentioned by the Advaita philosophy, that the self is the most prema aspada. That means it is actually the matter of prema to everybody. That means it is the most desired thing to everybody, dearest thing to everybody. And second thing, it is parama ananda rupa. Why everybody likes oneself? Because it is the place of absolute bliss. So thus we understand two things here, that the Atma, the self, is the dearest one because it is place of bliss. Nirdharmaka nitya swaprakasha sukhatmaka eva atma ityadyaha. So on the basis of this strong logic, we can easily conclude that the self, which is projecting itself in many ways, is one. It is not any doer, not any enjoyer. It is neither the perceiver. It is only of the form of knowledge. Nirdharmaka, and it has no properties. Properties can be changed, but the self has no property. It has only the very nature. Knowledge is its nature. Bliss is its nature, reality is its nature. Thus, it is the very nature of that particular self. Nitya swaprakasha, and it is eternal, and it is of the form of that bliss, and that is the true nature of this self. Swaprakasha eva atma. And thus, Madhusudana Saraswati shows here the strength of logic and proves how the Upanishads state the true nature of the self, that it is pure, absolute, without any distinctions, without any properties, and it is the energy to be realized within. Ityadyaha. There can be many more reasonings also, on the basis of which we can safely, comfortably establish the true nature of the self. Tasmat pariseshat bhrantihi iyam. Thus, tasmat, on account of this reasoning, parisheshat, that means when everything is discarded, whatever is left, we'll have to take recourse to that, and what is left is bhrantiriyam. So the world experience and the understanding of the self as karta, bhokta, pramata, etc. That means understanding the self as doer, enjoyer, perceiver, etc. is only bhrantihi, is only an illusion. It's not real. And this is the only way how we can understand the self, because all the other things are conditioned. And when we remove the conditions, the true nature of the self will shine forth. And the true nature of self has been explained earlier. And now, what is this experience, world experience, as Karta, Bhokta, etc.? The Madhusudana Saraswati concludes here that it is only Bhrantihi, it is only an illusion. And this illusion, iti sthite, tat karanamapi yogyam kinchit kalpaniyam. Okay, this world experience is only an illusion. Now, tat karanamapi, then what causes this kind of illusion? So, what makes me think that I am the doer, I am the enjoyer? What is the cause of this illusion? That yogyam parikalpaniyam. Now, Madhusudana Saraswati says, of course, we will have to postulate something competent to create this kind of illusion. So, what causes this illusion? We will have to search for that. And now, we understand what really causes this kind of mental framing. The science may say that the genetic framing, genetic fabrication is the cause of such one. But what is present in the genes also, what continues the genes, and what ultimately happens, how the beings are prompted again and again to take in the actions of bliss and perpetuate their particular class, what causes all this world experience? This is the central problem of all philosophy. And here Advaita system explains that it is adhyasa, caused by avidya, and finally everything leads to avidya, and removal of avidya is of course liberation. That's what the Advaita system says. And here we stop our class. Shanti Shanti Harihi Om.